Hi everyone, I'm MaryAnn. I'm a voice coach and visual artist from Singapore, currently in Singapore, and welcome to another installment of my weekly vlog series, Find Your Voice. So if you're someone who wants to learn how to sing, or you just want to be able to express yourself better, to improve the quality of your voice, to sound more resonant, to sound louder, to be able to speak confidently in front of an audience, to express yourself more authentically to those around you, to overcome your performance anxiety or any of these things related to performance and expression in any area of your life. This is where I share whatever it is that I'm learning in the process of expressing, in the journey of expressing myself more authentically, uncovering more about what this voice is really about, because it's not just about our physical voice. There's what I call the capital V voice, which is whatever it is that you are constantly trying to express over the course of your life in everything that you do. As human beings, we are born to express ourselves. Primarily, we do that through our voice, but there's also many other ways that we constantly are expressing who we are and what really matters to us and how we think and how we feel in every single aspect of our life, whether we realize it or not. And so working on our physical voice also allows us to indirectly and directly work on these other ways that we express ourselves in our lives, whether it's overcoming your anxiety towards performance, how to sound more resonant and more confident, how to be more outspoken, how to push past your fears around expressing yourself and be more authentically who you are, things like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, or you can also directly message me through any one of my social media links, which are in the write-ups attached to these videos. So what I want to share today is a little bit about the journey of mastery. And I'm not saying that, when it comes to working on your voice, you have to reach a level of like being a voice master. Of course, that is only if you want to get to that point, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, basically. But I believe that the journey of mastery is something that all of us at some point in our lives would aspire to go on, whether it's in your voice or whether it's in the other thing that you are trying to express over the course of your life, meaning like something in your career, the kind of professional work that you do, a certain skill set that you want to build yourself up in and become known for something and creating something in that area. This applies to basically anything. And the mastery journey is also something that happens when we are working on our voice. So not saying that you have to go all the way until you reach the level of mastery, but it's more sharing what this journey is like. And one of the things that I have learned about the mastery journey is that it's the progress that we make is not really like a linear scale. It's not a graph that you can plot on like a linear scale, where if you look at a graph, right, like y-axis, which is your progress, and like x-axis. I hope this video is not going to be like a mirror image, but like y-axis, x-axis. So the x-axis would be like time that passes, and a lot of times we assume that if we consistently work on something, we would see progress over time, and we kind of expect to see like this linear graph kind of going upwards in a straight line. But the reality is that most of the time, almost all the time, that is really not the case. If anything, if we chart progress as a graph, it looks a lot more like the stock market thing, where it's like it like goes up and it goes down and it goes up again and it goes down, and and it's really not that straightforward, that if you put in a lot of effort and consistent practice, that you would consistently see progress all the time, because that's just not how things work, and that's also not how our voices work. So one of the things that I learned about mastery and the journey of mastery, if we plot it out on a graph, right, is that in the beginning, when you just started on this journey, when you just started working on your voice and started doing these vocal exercises, or maybe you haven't done them for a while and you come back to it again, or you learn some new exercises if you've already been doing them, at some point in the beginning, you're going to see that linear graph going upwards. And that's because when you're starting from zero, any little bit of progress that you make is progress, basically. But it's going to reach a certain point where that linear graph going upwards, that line going upwards, would start to kind of like taper off, and you're gonna reach this like plateau where no matter how you keep practicing consistently, you will just see this line that is kind of flat, and it doesn't, it doesn't continue going up like it used to. And this is where a lot of people start to doubt if whatever they're doing is really effective, whether they're really making progress, whether they are, like maybe, and they start to question like, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I'm not meant to develop this skill set, maybe I'm not meant to learn this thing. And we have a lot of these conversations within ourselves, and so as a result, a lot of people would quit at this point because they're not seeing the progress that they're putting in. Now, of course, there could be many factors that affect this. It could be that maybe you're not doing the exercises correctly. It's also totally possible. Could be that you got a little bit lazy and you're not putting in as much effort as you did in the beginning, because sometimes also we have a thing, right, as humans, where we get used to a certain habit. Like, let's say if you're doing your voice practices every single day, for 20 minutes or something, at a certain point it's going to start feeling like it's a habit. It becomes like something that you do without even really thinking, whereas in the beginning you would put more thought and intention because you want to make sure you do it right. So sometimes when we lose that intention that we initially had, and that initial effort that we had, we get a bit lazy, and as a result we're not actually doing the exercises in the right way. And if you're not working with a voice coach who doesn't check in on you on how the exercises are going and ask you like, hey, show me what you've been practicing, then you may not realize that you're actually doing them, not doing them up to the standard that they're supposed to be. So it's also possible that you don't see progress because you got a little bit complacent when it comes to practice. But let's say, assuming that you have been consistently practicing and you are still making sure that you're doing the exercises correctly, and you're working with a coach who's making sure you're doing the exercises correctly, and in spite of all that somehow you don't see any progress, well, it's not like a huge thing to be concerned about, okay? And this is because we naturally would reach a point where our progress starts to taper off and it kind of plateaus. And it doesn't mean that you're stagnating. It doesn't mean that things are not effective anymore. It simply means that there's some stuff going on inside of you that is kind of like, we're always recalibrating ourselves, we're always adjusting ourselves, even if we don't realize it. Okay, there's actually a lot of stuff that happens in our bodies and in our minds and in our in our mental, emotional, physical states, right, that we're actually not aware of. Like, if you look at an iceberg, like, human consciousness has sometimes been compared to an iceberg, where you only see like, whatever you see above the water is just like 1% of that entire iceberg. So 99% of it is in the water that you can't even see. And so in the same way, when we are working on ourselves and our voice, like, that 1% is the progress that you can see, that 1% is what you're aware of in how you do your practices and how you listen to your own voice and your recordings to see whether there's any improvement. Like, that's your 1%. But 99%, there's stuff being like calibrated inside your body that's being adjusted. Like, even in your vocal cords, they'll be doing their own fine-tuning as well. And this is perfectly normal and perfectly and this is like really a really normal part of the process. But the reality of it is that it kind of starts to feel a little bit draggy. It starts to feel like, I'm doing this but I don't see any results. It starts to get very tempting to quit and to start wanting to do something else. And then, as long as you keep going at it, at a certain point, somehow, like, the graph will start going up again, and it will actually be going up a lot faster than it had been in the beginning stages when you just started. And it's really hard to say how long this stage would last, the plateau stage, because it really depends on every single individual. Everyone is different. And what I'm saying is that when you reach that plateau stage, you usually know when that happens, because you would start to find it kind of a struggle to maintain your practices. You will find that you're not hearing much progress, and again, check in with your coach to make sure that you're doing the exercises correctly. And as long as you're just doing them correctly, as long as you're still keeping them up, as long as you're still putting in the same amount of effort that you did in the beginning, at some point there will be that shift. Like once your physical, mental, emotional, whatever psyche of yours, once it calibrates itself, somehow there will be like this shift, and suddenly you would see like a whole lot of progress in that area. It's like people who learn a language, right? Like as an adult, which is so much more difficult than when you're a child. And if you're not, some people of course are gifted in languages. So if you're not one of those people who are gifted in languages, in the beginning it's like, you have all these words and you're like really getting the hang of it. And at a certain point, the more you learn the language, at some point you will start to struggle. And and then you would struggle and you would struggle and you would struggle for a while, and it would feel like no matter what you do, you can't seem to make any progress. And then suddenly one day you would wake up and you would hear someone say something in that language, and suddenly it's like it just hits you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally understood that. And it would just happen, yeah, provided of course that you do your work. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that it's a very normal part of the process, so don't get discouraged, even though yes, it is very easy to get discouraged. But keep going, continue your practices, continue doing whatever it is that you have been doing that has gotten you that progress in the beginning. Make sure of course that you're still doing your work in the right possible way, that you are still putting in the effort and the intention, that you're not just doing it half-heartedly. And at some point things would really unlock itself, and you would see like exponential progress until of course you hit the next plateau, because these plateaus are really a very normal part of any journey in mastery, whether it's your voice, whether it's language, any skills that you want to learn, the progress that you're making in your career, in your professional life, even in relationships. At some point couples would also hit a period of time where they stagnate, right? And then if they weather through that, suddenly they're like more in love than they ever were before. Like it's a very normal, natural cycle in life. And the most important thing I think is really just to make the best of every single day, and whatever stage of the journey you're in, just enjoy it, because this too shall pass. And it really all comes back down to what is it that you can do right here, right now? How do you approach this thing right here, right now? And don't worry too much about the future and what's going to come next. All we can do is just focus on the present moment and make it the best that we can be. And eventually, if you keep it up, you keep going, you will get to where you want to be. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. And if you like this video, subscribe to my channel on YouTube, and I will see you next week.